I was pruning the roses in my backyard when my phone rang, and the sound of my daughter's voice made me drop my shears right there in the dirt. She wasn't crying. That was the worst part. She was too exhausted to cry. She just said, "Mama, I need you to come." And the way she said it, barely above a breath, like speaking louder might cost her something she couldn't afford to lose. I already knew something had broken inside her. Not her body, something deeper. It was a Tuesday morning in late October. I remember that because the roses were finished for the season, and I was cutting them back the way my own mother taught me, saying goodbye to each branch like it mattered. I didn't even take off my garden gloves. I got in my car and drove 40 minutes to her house, with dirt still under my fingernails. My son-in-law let me in at the door. He had the look of a man who had rehearsed what he was going to say and then forgotten all of it the moment I arrived. He just stepped aside. He said, "She's in the bedroom." He didn't meet my eyes. I had never liked him much. I want to be honest about that. He wasn't a cruel man by nature. I'll give him that. But he was weak in the way that allows cruelty to move through a household without anyone ever being officially responsible. He smiled out at the right times. He never raised his voice. He let his mother do all the damage and kept his hands clean. My daughter was sitting up in bed with a heating pad across her lower back and both hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had long gone cold. She had bruising under her left eye. Not a fresh bruise, 4 or 5 days old. That greenish yellow that looks almost worse than the original purple. Her left wrist was wrapped. I sat down on the edge of the bed and I took that cold mug from her hands and I set it on the nightstand and I held her hands in both of mine and I said, "Tell me what happened." She looked at the door first, made sure it was closed. Then she looked at me, and what she said has lived in my chest every single day since. "His mother said I had it coming, Mama. She said a woman like me had no business in this family, that I'd brought low blood into their line, and sooner or later it was going to show." I didn't speak. I learned a long time ago that silence is sometimes the most loving thing you can offer a person who is finally saying the thing they've been holding for too long. "She didn't hit me herself," my daughter said, "but she told him things. For months she told him things. She said I was unfaithful. She said I'd been lying about my background. She made up an entire history for me. And he believed her. He chose to believe her. The bruise under her eye, the wrapped wrist. I kept holding her hands. I did not let go. She was 6 months pregnant with their second child. Their first, a little boy, had been born 14 months earlier and was napping in the next room. I could hear the soft white noise machine through the wall. "How long?" I asked. "The hitting started 3 weeks ago. The rest of it, the words, the accusations, almost a year. A year. My daughter had been surviving this for a year while I pruned roses and made Sunday dinners and thought she seemed a little quiet lately, a little tired, and told myself it was just new motherhood, just the adjustment. I will carry that for the rest of my life." I asked her if she had told anyone. A friend, a doctor, anyone. She shook her head. She made sure I didn't have anyone left. Every friend I had, she found a reason. Every plan I made, there was a conflict. I kept thinking he'd come back to himself. I kept thinking she'd get tired of it. I went to the living room to get my purse. My son-in-law was sitting on the couch with his elbows on his knees, looking at the floor. He looked up when I came in. He started to say something. I said, "Don't." Just that one word. He closed his mouth. I called my younger sister from the hallway bathroom, with the door locked and the fan running. She is 63 years old and has been an attorney for 35 of them. I told her what I knew. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Is your daughter able to travel?" "She can travel," I said. "Then bring her here. Tonight. Bring the baby. Bring whatever documents you can find quickly. Her ID, the baby's birth certificate, insurance cards. And come. Don't tell him where you're going." I said. "He'll call the police," she said. "Let him. She's not under arrest for leaving her own marriage. And once I see that bruise in person, this becomes a very different conversation for him and his mother both." I went back to the bedroom and I sat down again and I said to my daughter, "You're coming with me right now. We're going to your aunt's house." She started to say something about the furniture, about her plants, about the baby's crib. I said, "We are not coming back for any of it tonight. We are leaving tonight. The rest is just things." She looked at me for a long moment. She was 34 years old, and she had her father's eyes. He passed 8 years ago, and in that moment, she looked exactly the way she had looked at 5 years old, when she'd fallen off her bicycle and was deciding whether to cry. "Okay, Mama," she said. We were in the car in 40 minutes. My son-in-law stood on the front porch as we backed out. He had his phone in his hand. He didn't say anything. He just watched us go, and I watched him in the rearview mirror, and I thought, I hope you understand what this moment means. I hope you understand that whatever came before it, this is the moment you will always come back to. My sister lives in a colonial on a tree-lined street 2 towns over. She had the guest room made up by the time we arrived. She hugged my daughter for a long time in the doorway, not saying anything, just holding her. She had already called her colleague, a family law attorney with 30 years of practice, who said she could meet with us first thing in the morning. That night, after my daughter was asleep and the baby was down, my sister and I sat at her kitchen table with chamomile tea, and I told her everything. All of it. The whole year's worth of what I hadn't known was happening. She listened, she nodded, and then she said something I've thought about many times since. The mother-in-law is the architect. The son is the instrument. Courts don't always see it that way, but the right attorney does. What does that mean for my daughter? I asked. It means we're not just dealing with a domestic matter, she said. The slander, the fabricated history, the campaign to isolate her, that's documented harm. If we can establish the pattern, and we can, then this isn't only about a divorce. This is about accountability. The next morning, the attorney came to the house. She was a small woman with white hair and reading glasses on a beaded chain, and she asked my daughter questions for 3 hours. Methodical questions. Dates, incidents, witnesses, any texts or voicemails my daughter had saved. My daughter had saved more than I expected. She had a habit of screenshotting things and keeping them in a private folder on her phone. She hadn't known why she was doing it. She told the attorney she just felt like she needed to, like some part of her was already preparing for a version of events she hoped would never come. The attorney looked at those screenshots for a long time. "Did his mother ever communicate with you directly?" she asked. My daughter said yes. There were voice messages, long ones, sometimes, delivered in the measured tone of a woman who had taught herself to sound reasonable while saying unreasonable things. The attorney set down her pen. "I'm going to need copies of all of these," she said. "What you have here is not just a record of harassment. What you have here is a pattern of deliberate conduct designed to destabilize you and your marriage. That changes what we can do significantly." My son-in-law had, predictably, called his mother the night we left. I know this because his mother called me. I had never spoken to this woman more than pleasantries at holidays. She lived 2 states away and maintained her influence through phone calls and visits strategically timed to do the most damage. She called me at 7 in the morning on her son's behalf and told me I was interfering in a private family matter. I told her I was her grandchild's grandmother and my daughter's mother, and that the only family matter I was concerned with was the well-being of both of them. She said some things I won't repeat here. Things about what kind of people we were. Things about blood and background and what she had always suspected about our family. I let her speak. I did not interrupt her once, and when she was finally finished, I said, "Thank you. I'll make sure my sister's colleague has this recording as well." Silence on the line. "I've been recording this call from the beginning," I said. "In this state, one-party consent is all that's required. You have a good morning now." I hadn't planned to say that last part. It just came out. My sister, who had been standing across the kitchen listening, pressed her hand over her mouth to keep from making a sound. The weeks that followed were not easy. I want to be honest about that too, because I think sometimes in these stories it sounds like once the leaving happens, the hard part is over. It is not. The hard part is different, but it is still hard. My daughter had days where she second-guessed herself. Days where she missed her life. Not her husband, not exactly, but the version of her life she had believed she was building. The nursery she'd painted herself. The neighborhood she'd walked with the stroller every morning. The routines that had held her when nothing else felt stable. I let her grieve that. I sat with her in those feelings, and I did not try to rush her through them. My son-in-law's attorney sent letters. There were negotiations over temporary custody arrangements for the baby, which were the most painful part. My daughter handled them better than I expected. She had found a steadiness in herself that I think she didn't know was there. Difficult circumstances have a way of introducing people to parts of themselves they hadn't met yet. His mother made one more attempt to intervene. She showed up, without warning, at my sister's house on a Thursday afternoon. I happened to be there when she arrived. She was smaller in person than I had imagined. Well-dressed. The kind of woman who has learned to use her composure as a weapon. She stood on my sister's front step and told me that she only wanted to talk. That this had all been a misunderstanding, that she had her son's best interests at heart, and she hoped I understood that. I told her I understood exactly what she had in her heart. I told her that her grandchildren, all of them, including the one not yet born, would know the full truth of what she had done to their mother when the time was right and when they were old enough to hear it. Not from bitterness, from honesty, because children deserve to understand the world they were born into. I told her that her son had a choice to make, and that the choice had nothing to do with me or my sister or any attorney. It had to do with what kind of man he wanted to be when his children were old enough to remember. She left without saying anything else. My daughter's second child, a girl, was born 11 weeks later at a hospital 20 minutes from my sister's house. My sister and I were both in the waiting room. When the nurse came out and told us she had arrived safely and that my daughter was resting and doing well, my sister and I held each other's hands and we didn't have to say a single word. I went in first. The baby was in my daughter's arms, wrapped in a white blanket with a little pink hat. My daughter looked exhausted and beautiful and like herself, the self I had been waiting to see come back for almost a year. "What's her name?" I asked. My daughter smiled and said, "I named her after you, Mama, her middle name." I won't tell you what I said to that. Some things belong only to the people in the room. The divorce was finalized the following spring. My son-in-law, to his credit, did eventually stop letting his mother's voice be louder than his own conscience. He has been, in the time since, a present and attentive father. My daughter did not ask me what I thought of that development, and I did not offer an opinion. What happens between them now is theirs to navigate. My job was never to manage her future. My job was to make sure she still had one. His mother faced consequences that I will not detail here because I don't believe in describing another person's punishment as a trophy. I will only say that the recordings, the screenshots, and the testimony of 3 independent witnesses painted a picture that was impossible to minimize or explain away. The attorney my sister called was very good at her job. What I want to say, what I think about when I'm back in my garden, cutting back the roses at the end of each season, is this. There is a version of this story where I didn't answer the phone that Tuesday morning, where I told myself she sounded tired but fine, and put the phone back in my pocket and kept pruning. I think about that version more than I should. I answered because I recognized something in her voice. Not the words, the space between the words. The particular quality of silence that exists in a person who has been carrying something alone for too long and has finally decided they might be able to put some of it down. You can learn a great deal about love by paying attention to silence. My daughter is settled now. She has a house of her own, a job she had put on hold and reclaimed, 2 healthy children who have their grandmother over for dinner twice a month and know all their great-aunt's best stories. She laughs the way she used to laugh before all of it, fully, without watching the door. Last week, she called me on a Tuesday morning, and my heart still did a small, frightened thing the moment I saw her name on the screen. Probably it always will. Some reflexes don't fully go away. They just coexist with the trust you've rebuilt. She was calling to ask if I wanted to come over that weekend and help her plant bulbs in the yard. I said I'd be there Saturday morning early and to make sure there was coffee. She said, "Mama, there is always coffee." That is the whole truth of it. After everything, all the damage, all the long nights, all the documents and depositions and hard conversations, there is always coffee. There is always Saturday morning. There is always a garden that needs tending and a daughter who calls, and the particular grace of being the person she calls. That is enough. That has always been enough.